Welcome back everybody, David here with Med School Bootcamp. So now we're going to move on to nephrology pathology. So we've just finished up our physiology section. Now we're going to start to see what kind of diseases can present in the kidneys and the urinary system. So this first chapter is going to be broken up into 3 short sections. We're going to first talk about nomenclature. So we're all on the same page. When we talk about kind of medical jargon, there's a lot of words and references that we may not be familiar with, that we don't know. And so we're going to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of when we say there's focal sclerosis, we know what that means. Then we're going to dive into some urinalysis basics, and we're going to finish this chapter up with talking about urinary casts. Urinary casts are an important tool for diagnosing different renal pathologies. So if you all are ready, then off we go. So in this video, we're just going to talk about nomenclature. And the first thing that we need to think about and determine is when we say something is primary versus secondary. So if we say something is primary, we mean that the disease itself is directly causing damage to the glomerulus. So an example that we'll talk more about later on is minimal change disease, or MCD. This is in contrast to when we say something is secondary. If we say it's secondary, that means it's something else is ultimately what causes damage to the kidney itself. So primary is a kidney damage at the source, and secondary is kidney damage due to something else, or secondary to. So right here you see I've listed as secondary causes are systemic diseases that can affect the glomerulus. Some classic examples include SLE, or systemic lupus erythematosus. We'll talk much more about those in upcoming videos. The next commonly used term is focal versus diffuse. And this is really separating how much glomerular involvement is there. If there's less than 50%, we can say that a patient has focal glomerular disease, and if it's greater than 50%, we can say that a patient has diffuse or widespread glomerular disease. Obviously, this cutoff of 50% is rather arbitrary, right? If it's 49% involvement, then which one is it? That's a little bit out of the scope of what we need to know, but approximately we'll use 50% as our cutoff of a focal disease versus a diffuse disease. And again, as we talk about these pathologies one by one, it's going to be helpful for determining, what is the patient's most likely diagnosis when we look at histology, right? Some of the histology images are going to show small areas of involvement in the glomerulus, and you can say, oh, that's probably focal. And other pathologies are going to show widespread glomerular involvement, and you can say, oh, that's probably diffuse. And that's going to help us with determining the ultimate cause of the patient's condition. A couple more words that we might need to be familiar with include membranous, which is just saying that there's a thickened glomerular basement membrane. This commonly occurs in a condition called membranous nephropathy. Much more on that to come. And finally, another commonly used term is proliferative. And what that means is there's an increased number of cells involved in this pathologic process. So a classic one is membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis. So you can imagine on histology, we would expect to see an increased amount of cells in that glomerulus because that's part of the pathology. That's part of the diagnostic criteria. So these are the main ones I want you to know. There are some other words that can show up. Some other words that might show up that may be new to you include things like sclerosing, which just means scarring, necrotizing, which refers to cellular death. And there's also crescentic, and that is referring to a collection of fibroblasts, macrophages, and epithelial cells that can accumulate in the Bowman space, and essentially it creates this kind of crescent shape in the glomerulus, and that is, again, a way that we can look at things on histology and figure out what the patient's pathology might be. So these are just some terms that I want you to be familiar with, so when we talk about them in the upcoming videos, you'll have seen them or heard of them once or twice before. You'll be a little bit more familiar with the terminology that we're discussing with these pathologies. And a good test-taking strategy is if you look at the words, the pathology, right? Membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, if you break that up, right? Membranoproliferative and then glomerulonephritis, if you break it up into subsections of words, you can kind of get an idea of what the pathology might involve. What might it look like? How might it present in a patient? And then we'll build on that information in future videos going forward. And so with that said, I will see you all in the next one.